Okay, we've seen how to create a warm brown iron effect. I'm going to look at creating a sort of colder steel effect now, and I'm going to use this large gun unit to demonstrate this. So to create this, I'm going to use the same basic mix as I used on the warm iron, the Battlefield Brown and Bolt Gun Metal, but I'm adding some Exile Blue into the mix just to cool the colour. I've got my Battlefield Brown Bolt Gun Metal mix here, and I'm adding the Exile Blue now, and the effect, give the brush a wash, the effect is to take out the warmth but keep a really interesting set of tones. So again, we've deepened the value of the paint, making it darker, but rather than just being a flat neutral grey, there is some colour tone to this metallic. Okay, here's our gun from earlier, painted and dried nicely now, and the process is going to be pretty much the same. I'm going to be ink washing it now, just like I did with the other metal, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use my Devlin mud, get that open, but I'm going to add to the Devlin mud a little tiny speck of blue ink, if I can find it here in my paint container. There we go. I'm going to use the Azuman Blue from the same wash range of Games Workshop, and that's going to make the Devlin mud a much colder colour. You can see here I've mixed this colour and it's kind of a neutral cold grey. In fact, I'm going to add even more blue to that. There we go. I'm also going to add a touch of water. Let's brush that on into the detail, and that's going to shade that metal with this slightly bluish tinge. Makes me think of gun oil. There we go. See that going on there. And again, I'm going to finish the whole surface, ready for some highlighting. So we'll catch up with this model in a moment when that ink is dry. Just one quick look before we go. There we are. Okay, so now you can see that the weapon has dried, and so I'm going to highlight it up. I'm going to take some Exile Blue here. There we go. And my bolt gun again onto the palette. Little tiny speck of blue. Very bad of me there, not washing my brush. Little tiny speck of blue into there, and I'm going to quickly brush this on. And again, working with a damp but not wet brush, just blend just around the edges there to get a nice colour transition. And do the same thing on the body of the gun here. Paint on, and then blend in the colour. Doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. And repeat for this area. There we go. And then just at the back here, I'm not going to do the entire model because again we're using the same technique as before, nothing new here. We're just making sure that the colours look quite smooth. Okay, I'm going to take some pure silver, take a small amount of that, add a little bit of Exile Blue to it. That's a little much. So again, we've got a blue tinge to the silver now. I don't know if how well you're going to pick that up, but it is subtle, but there. And again, I'm going to brush this on. I'm going to concentrate on building it up around the edges that I want to exaggerate, like so. And you can take quite some time over this process, just layering up colour. I'm actually going quite quickly. Again, damp brush, and just smoothing on a bit of colour variation, blending those edges. There we go. Bit around the edge there. Okay. So our cold steel is starting to build up nicely now. To finish off, I'm going to get some pure silver, and I'm just going to edge the highlight on. Because metal has a shiny surface, you want it to look like it's catching points of light. Don't be afraid, no matter what colour you're painting, don't be afraid to go with pure silver highlights on the very edges. Just a little dot of silver here and there can really make a metallic surface pop. Let's just do around the edge of that. That's probably enough to give a feel. And you can see that. I'm going to bring the original axe blade in. Here we go, look. We've got our warm silver and our much colder gunmetal going on here. Now I could exaggerate this blue steel kind of finish even more with a bit of carefully worked in blue ink in this exactly the same manner as I did on the axe blade with the chestnut ink. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to touch briefly on brass and by extension gold, and then I'm going to talk about weathering. Just to show that the technique works with different kinds of metals, I'm working on a bronze here. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because it's pretty much the same process as before. I've just base coated this with a mix of brass balls, bloodstone and battlefield brown, more or less 1/3 of each, which has given me this nice tone. Now I just wanted to pick out something that can be quite a neat trick when you've got a whole large surface of flat metal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some battlefield brown, slightly watered down, and my brass balls bloodstone mix is still quite wet on the surface, so I'm actually going to paint the battlefield brown around the bottom edge of this weapon, like this, and then working quickly with a clean brush I'm going to blend those colours together. So effectively I'm wet blending on the surface of the model. I don't need a massive amount of this, but what it's going to do is create a darker area of metal. So you can see there it's painted on quite roughly, and then I'm just going to take the brush and blend the two colours until I get a smoother transition, and this is going to be a useful starting point for my colour transitions and my highlighting. That's just worked well for the brass. You can do that for all shades of metal. I could have done that using browns and blues for the other two, but it's just going to give me some nice colour as I ink wash and highlight that. And here's the same weapon. What I've done there is I've ink washed it using Devlin mud with a bit of chestnut ink, and I highlighted it up using brass balls up to pure, on the very edges here, pure silver. So it was brass balls blended in, brass balls with about 50-50 silver mix blended around the top edges, and then there's some pure silver to finish, giving me a lovely deep metal effect. And with a line of chestnut ink along the bottom edge, I think you can really appreciate the colour transition that wet blended brown over the brown base or brownish metal base I should say, gave it. So that's come out really nicely. So exactly the same painting techniques, just a different palette of colours for a really lustrous gold finish. Okay, let's talk about weathering, dirt and decay. Okay, I'm back with my axe here, and I'm going to make it look a bit rusty. I'm going to take some bloodstone to my palette here. I'm going to water it down quite severely, so it's a very runny mix. It doesn't even sit properly on the palette. And this I'm going to brush around the edges of the axe, and straight away you can see we're getting a rusty finish. And the point of watering it down so much is that I can brush it over the entire surface if I choose, and I can use the brush to dapple at it and create some nice irregular weathering. So I just want to talk about surface damage in the form of scratches. The thing about scratches on a metal surface is they are very bright and shiny because the metal has been ground away, so all the oxidization has cleared and the metal's all lying in the same direction. So an effective way of painting scratches is just a few very fine lines of pure silver, completely untempered in any way. I'm just going to put some very, very fine lines on here, and then I'll hold this up for you to see. There we go. And it just breaks up the surface and gives an additional sense of there being damage on the weapon. Okay, and the last thing I want to look at today, going back to our brass, is some verdigris. So I'm back with my brass, polished brass joint here, and just to finish the bronze effect I'm going to be adding some verdigris. Now you can mix verdigris, it's a simple enough bluey greeny colour, but I'm taking a shortcut and using some Games Workshop Hawk Turquoise, which I've watered down very heavily. You can see here it's very, very watery. The reason I watered it down so much is I want to be able to spot it around areas like these rivets and just have it very subtly filling that area, but not completely obliterating the colour underneath. So it's a wash more than a painting technique. A little bit in there, and I'll dapple some onto the surface. Okay, so here's our finished piece of bronze with some verdigris on. Not too over the top, but it gives a nice colour variation. There we go. And I'm quite happy with that. And that's just been brushed into the edges and then stippled onto the surface and allowed to dry. And I use these techniques extensively on the models I'm painting. I hope you can take something from this. I hope you can adapt it to your own use, and I hope that there'll be a few things in there that you find helpful in your own painting. And I hope you've enjoyed everything I've talked about today, and thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and good luck with your painting.